Warning: the following video contains explicit language which may be offensive to some viewers or inappropriate for children. The content within this video is intended for mature audiences only.
Science fiction, the great teacher, the great inspiration. It helps us see the endless possibilities of life. So let's be inspired together.
We are all explorers, driven to know what's over the horizon, what's beyond our own shores.
We are not sending out interceptors. We have taken them completely by surprise.
So then we get to the Borg Queen, which I thought was dead, you know? Or I figured, it would be a Borg Queen from another dimension, just like the last season, it was a queen from another dimension that they had picked up along their adventure there when they went into that alternate reality or something. So they get Alice Krieg's voice back into playing, which was good. I mean, she played the Queen pretty well in First Contact, even though I totally reject the idea of a Queen being part of a Borg, thing at all. It's sort of, because if you look at the very first time the Borg was ever introduced, the Borg in the cube operated as a single mind, which means they are the Queen and they are the Hive, all in one. Okay? They all think as one, okay? You don't need a controller. It's like imagine the Borg, all individual Borg being like changeling parts, okay? And when you put them all together, they're just one being. Well, mechanically, that's what they've done. Technological, they've created that same concept when they all think as one, when they're, in the cube, I guess. And so they've evolved beyond the point of ever needing a queen or a central mind to operate them. It's like they already know what to do. And so I never liked the idea of them having a queen. The reason why they put a queen in there was to give a avenue of a way to defeat the Borg, because they just couldn't come up with a way to defeat the Borg initially until they injected data into the Borg technologically, and he shut them down, okay? So right there, that tells you, if there was a queen, that never would have happened. The queen would have stopped it, okay? So the fact that they brought, the queen into there was just something that just didn't sit right with me from that day, And somebody told me that every time they use the Borg in a story, they weaken the Borg all the more just to make it easier for writers to come to a conclusion about them. And in this case, it was no different. They created a situation that was so easily able to be stopped that it was almost laughable that we went through the whole 10 hours of this season only to find out that, oh, hey, all you got to do is fly down into the core of the cube, blow up this little thing, and then it's all over. It's like, oh, so, they after everything was said and done, it was that simple, okay? And so, like I said, they overuse the Borg to the point of ridiculousness now. And I hope that's the last time that Star Trek ever brings that fucking race back into existence, okay? Because I think it's ridiculous now. We beat it to death. So, seeing the Queen to me was kind of a letdown. That it all ended up being about the Borg, okay? And nothing about Vadic. Vadic was just a lackey, okay, working for the changelings who were working with the Borg, okay? It was a big conspiracy all the way around, which, I guess you could say the Queen was desperate and was willing to work with anybody who could help the Borg kick the ass of the Federation no matter what. She came back insane, basically, and she didn't care about her drones. She was using them to keep herself alive by cannibalizing them in some fashion. which explains why the Borg cube was such a wreck. Okay, it looked like they beamed down into a junkyard with everything laid out all over the floor, and sparks everywhere. And of course, they say that only 30-something% of the cube is even functional. I mean, it's like she limped her way back to the Alpha Quadrant in that broken down cube after Janeway had pretty much, destroyed them. The interesting part, though, was the idea that through all the years, the Borg somehow manipulated transporter technology to insert what I call as activator chips inside of each person to be activated at a certain time and create the assimilation process. And somehow they tampered with Federation transporter technology in order to do that. And I think they used the changelings, if I'm not mistaken. The changelings were the beings that could operate in secrecy because they can look like anybody. And over the years, while the changelings were in the Federation and Starfleet, they were adjusting the transporters to do this for the Borg. So after 30-something years have gone by, just about everybody has got one of those activator chips in their DNA somehow, and on command they will begin to assimilate or become Borg. Which goes back to the plan that the Queen on Voyager had mentioned about assimilating the humans slowly. And that would have done that in this thing. So they didn't forget about that plot. The Queen was already hatching that idea way back on Voyager, and now we see it came to fruition in Picard Season 3. And for some reason, I guess the activator chip doesn't work on people after a certain age point, I guess, which would reason out why the TNG cast was okay. They didn't get, none of them got assimilated except for Geordi's daughter, who did. But they had to shut down the connection to the Borg to stop that chip inside controlling their actions, which meant they had to go find the cube and blow that up as because it's the source of where the commands are being sent. Because Jack was assimilated into the Borg as he was meant to be, okay, and he is the one giving the commands to all the assimilated humans on attacking Earth, the space dock, Starfleet in general, okay. And everything was linked to the cube, and that was where the attention needed to be brought, okay. So I thought that was an interesting idea. However, it's not an idea that's original, because they used that idea in Battlestar Galactica when they in Ron Moore's Battlestar Galactica, excuse me, where the Cylons had tampered with human technology by implanting a back door, if you will, into their computers on all the Battlestars, so that way when the Cylons show up, they can shut down the entire fleet and just wipe them out at their leisure. Which, like I said, that was very reminiscent of that, and I thought that was like, come on, it's just, I mean, it was the transporter idea was fine. That was kind of an original, but the concept as a whole was not. So, I guess you could say, well, they didn't copy it verbatim, but they just found a different way using Star Trek terminology and technology to be able to do the same thing. And so it's like, well, okay, but it's not original. And I was hoping that something new would come out of this season, because that's really what Star Trek's all about, is something new, And we didn't get anything new out of this, just exacerbations of things that had already come and gone, okay, like the Dominion and the Borg and, the changelings, So, none of that was new, okay? So, yeah, I was kind of disappointed there with the Queen and the Borg stuff all there. But it was nice that Alice Krige bothered to come back and do the voice. There were times when I thought the Borg Queen sounded like Dr. Crusher. I don't know if it was just me or how many of you out there kind of noticed it, but it seemed to me like it was Gates McFadden's voice they were using to play the Borg Queen. And I don't know, maybe they did that on purpose just to make people confused and not really know who it was, but that's what I think they probably did, was they just had Gates voice over the Queen a little bit because they didn't want to reveal right off that it was the Queen or Susan, or I mean not Susan, but Alice Krieg, so I figured that's why they did it, just to kind of screw with the people's heads here at home with the idea. And then there's Captain Shaw, which I can't understand. You people out there that watch this season, I read your comments on the different reviews of this season. And a lot of you out there say you liked Shaw, okay? Now, I'm not going to say there's something wrong with you for liking Shaw, but I really could not find any reason how anyone could watch this character and feel like, oh, he's a good character. There was nothing that was brought to this character that, in my mind, was remotely positive. Okay? I mean, there's been a character like that before in TNG. Jellicoe. Remember Captain Jellicoe? Okay? Yeah, he was tough as nails, but he wasn't disrespectful. Okay? He wasn't disrespectful to Picard, rather. Okay? He got disrespectful to Riker because he didn't see that Riker was actually doing what he was told, and as fast as he could get it done. Okay, apparently he gets that from his other first officer on the previous ship that he commanded, but apparently Riker, who operates differently, he's not used to it and he resents that. Okay, so there was an explanation there to why Jellicoe and Riker would eat each other's throats here. But at some point they come to a middle ground where they can work with each other, and so they kind of resolve that issue. But a lot of the people on the Enterprise didn't really like Jellicoe for his hard-edged kind of way of captaining a ship. But he was, in my opinion, a more a realistic version of what a typical line officer would be in Star Trek, because you got captains that have a character and a personality, and you got captains that are there for their paycheck or something, or they're just there to do the job and not to make friends so much. It's just nose to the grindstone 24/7. A lot of people are like that, and when I was in the military I saw folks like that too. So that was, Jellicoe to me wasn't unusual. But Shaw, on the other hand, Shaw was a guy that had a chip on his shoulder so noticeable that it made the crew nervous, because it came out in droves when Picard and Riker showed up. He couldn't wait to throw insult after disrespect at the two of them. And even though, it comes out later that, Shaw was at Wolf 359, and he hated Picard after that since then, you're talking about 35 years prior to that. He would have been a young man, Shaw. Really young, because, he didn't really look that old on that. So he would have been like an ensign or something like that on the other ship. So, yeah, I would have thought that after that much time, he would have worked it out, okay? That's what we're supposed to think about humans in the future, is that they eventually come to understanding things a lot better than we do today. They don't hold grudges like that to the point of, that many years. And, since Picard had done so many things since that time when he was Locutus and did it well, you would think Picard would have earned some respect back. I mean, he did fight the Borg in First Contact and defeated them, right? So why didn't that matter to Shaw then? Why did he just skip over that friggin' incident and just cling to that? Maybe it's because it's more personal. I don't know. But then why would he ask for 7 of 9 to be his first officer when he has so much animosity over the Borg? Okay, that to me was kind of a really confusing thing. You would think that he wouldn't want anything to do with the Borg after what happened to him at Wolf 359. You'd think that he would have just completely you never would have saw 7 on that ship. And I felt like, this is really, it doesn't make sense, and this is just another incident where Picard is being spit on by somebody, that he doesn't know. I mean, it happened before with Benjamin Sisko, but even, after Sisko kind of come to terms with that on his own, realizing that, holding back the grief and all that and experience, it was not helping him any, and he had to feel it to get through it. And it just seemed like, once he did that, I guess he figured, that there was no reason to hate Picard anymore. He's not Locutus. He got through it, and he's, so it just seemed like, that's an awful long time to hold such a strong grudge over somebody. And that means this guy has been walking around with a chip on his shoulder, which makes him a really, a wild card in a bunch of, leaders in the fleet, okay? If something happened that dealt with the Borg, you wouldn't know what he'd do, okay? He would be like the last person you'd put on the front line against the Borg. The way they treated Picard in First Contact, that's what they would have done with Shaw, because he had such a history with the Borg that affected him so well. And believe me, they counsel him after that mess, they would have known, okay, that he was holding on to that. So he wouldn't have been the person to bring into a fight with the Borg, because his own personal grief and everything was still there, as it just happened yesterday, in his mind. And it would have made him a dangerous person in the captain's chair. He would have risked the lives of everybody on that ship, just to get even with them, okay? So it was noticeable when they showed the crew, listening to the Captain Shaw berating Picard, the way he was doing it, that was like, whoa, even in the military today, you don't do that. Even if the guy's retired, you don't disrespect somebody like that in that fashion. You take that conversation somewhere private, not in front of the crew, because that reduces the respect that your crew is going to give you when they see you doing that to somebody like, like as famous as Picard. Because the young people on the ship admired Picard. They admired Jean-Luc. They didn't like what Shaw was doing, okay? So that, in my mind, really laid down the foundation of an opinion about the guy, and I'm saying that guy's he's a problem. He's not a good character at all. He's got a lot of issues that he should have worked out a long time before he took command of that ship, and that's just unfortunate that they were playing the character that way. And it really bothered me when so many people said, "Oh, I like Shaw. I want to see him back in another show." Where, maybe that explains why so many people today are just choosing the wrong leaders for our country. Maybe that's the root of the mindset. Where we see a guy or a person with so many issues and problems, we think that's the person I want leading our country. Then that would explain why we all thought, well, not all, but why so many people thought Trump was the best guy to have, right? So, not to put any political stuff in here, but I just had to interject that little observation there. When I watched you guys commenting on how good you thought this captain was, I don't think you guys, if you haven't been in the military, I don't think you really had the background to be able to analyze this character the way I did, okay? He just wasn't captain material. He needed a break, or to get discharged early from Starfleet, because he simply could not deal with what happened when he was in that battle. And it's not unusual for somebody not to recover from a thing like that, okay? Some people can't go back after surviving a big battle like that. If they survived it, they can't go back because of the PTSD, or the fact that, it triggers things in them. It makes their personality different. It's not unusual for that, and there's no shame in it when a person can't come back to service after an experience like that. To make that, to say that character could come back and do what he did was, to be a captain was too much responsibility for for a mind that was still shattered, basically, from something that happened so many years before. So I thought that was really a mistake, really, But I guess at the end, when he dies and he hands over the reins to of his ship to Seven of Nine, to me it seemed like, well, that was the whole reason why we made this character the way he was, and why he had, you know, to redeem himself, he had to sacrifice himself so that way Seven of Nine could be captain. You know, I felt, well, that was kind of a convoluted way to introduce a character just so he could die and give Seven the keys to his ship. You know, so that seemed to be a waste of a character to me, because they didn't really make him likable in any way, and then they kill him off, and that's how Seven gets the chair. Okay. Which brings me to Seven of Nine, and Jerry Ryan, as always, does very well acting as Seven of Nine. We see that, you know, she's still kind of, you know, I can't understand why she doesn't want to be called Annika Hansen instead of Seven of Nine, because to me it seems like she's still kind of clinging. Even after all these decades, she's still clinging to that Seven of Nine name. Like, she still wants to cling to the Borg, and part of her does, you know. And I would think that the last thing that, you know, she would want to be reminded of something that was really traumatic for her as a child is to keep using that name. It keeps reminding her of, you know, what she was. And at this point, I would think she'd just want to distance herself as far from it as she can, which seemed to me like that was the point in season 1, when we find that she's working for this rogue group of people, and it seemed like there was some dialogue between her and Picard where she's trying to say she's trying to still deal with having been a Borg, and it's a struggle. And I would think that one of those struggles is for her to kind of let go of that friggin' name, Seven of Nine, you know, just drop it. You're Annika Hansen now. So, but anyway, that's like the only part of her character on the show that I kind of cringed at, that they were still calling her that. And she's using it as a positive instead of a negative. Okay, it seemed like it's a really kind of a contradiction to what her character overall is trying to do, is evolve back to being to a human. Even though she can't really go completely back, she's making the effort. And one of the easiest efforts, I think, to make is to realize her real name, you know, and work with it instead of spending all that time being called Seven of Nine. Okay. And so let's see, what other characters here? Am I missing any? Yeah, Jack Crusher. Okay, interesting character. He seemed to be the kind of, you know, character that would resemble Picard when he was young. Okay, kind of carefree, risk taker, flirty, and I think that maybe that's the way Jean-Luc was, you know, when he was at that age, or, you know, and that's probably how they told the actor how to play him. So, but, you know, where did he get the accent, right? Was that, is it in the DNA, as they say, you know, for it to have an accent like that? So that was like, you know, how did he get that same British accent as Jean-Luc? You know, sort of like, well, come on. That was like sending up too many, like, ding, 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 you know, this is who he's, you know. So I felt like that was too an obvious thing, you know. They should have not let him have an accent. They just make him, you know, speak the way, you know, without one. But Jack was, you know, they really made Jack into a mystery, which was not easy to figure out. Everybody was guessing right up to the end there, when he was finally assimilated into the Borg. Everybody was guessing what he was. Some people thought he was a Pa Wraith because his eyes glowed red. I knew it wasn't that, because if it was anything to do with Deep Space Nine, they'd have been injecting all kinds of Deep Space Nine material into the story as it went. Unfortunately, I was hoping that this wouldn't just be a TNG closure story, that it would actually close up the entire saga of both TNG, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager into one big ending, because that would explain why we had to follow this series and we had to follow that series, because at the end, all these series culminates into one story that involves everybody, where everybody has to deal with something that finally brings resolution to an overall story, which would explain why we had, we watched that series and we watched this series. That would have brought a lot of legitimacy back into Deep Space Nine, because a lot of fans today don't really have, that many good opinions about Deep Space Nine, but they watched it anyway because Worf was in it. But it would have basically brought Deep Space Nine right into the fold with everything else, and would have legitimized, and maybe got some people to go back and watch Deep Space Nine all over again, where we could have saw where this was leading to, okay? Because that really was the representation of the 24th century, was those three shows, okay? They represented that, that whole era of the 24th century was the three shows. So what better way to bring closure to the whole TNG storyline in that century is to have all those spin-offs and TNG together, finally bringing an end to some big arc of a story. And I figured it would probably involve maybe that thing of the changeling, the life forms in the wormhole and all that, because that seemed to be an epic kind of thing to deal with, and that probably would have been the way to end the series somehow. I don't know, but that's how I figured, because there was so much speculation going on around the fandom that we're going to see Cisco, and we'll be back at Deep Space Nine. And I was figuring, well, if any of that's true, then that means that they're trying to make a big giant story that brings closure to all three of those spin-offs, okay? Because you got 7 of 9 there, so we wonder, where did 7 of 9 come from? It goes all the way back to Voyager, and what happened, so it's like, this is really going to bring everything together. I thought they were saying Janeway was going to be in it, Admiral Janeway, and I figured, well, this has to be what this is. It's going to be a giant story. So I figured that was going to be it. But when I started to see the reviews and people talking about it, it's like, it doesn't sound like anything like that at all. It's just going to be a goodbye to the TNG cast and the end, okay? Which I thought was, a missed opportunity there. If they had some good writer to be able to come out, conjure up a story that brings all those stories together to a conclusion, that would have been, in my opinion, a better way to end this season, okay? But that's just me. Okay. But yeah, Jack, was a good character to show what had gone on between Picard and Beverly, and how things were working with that. And yeah, that was an interesting character, to say the least. And it was really emotional, I think, at the very end, when Picard was willing to give up his own life, basically, for a son he just knew for a couple of days, because that, again, emphasizes how important family was to him at that time, even then, which is why I say that they really should have beaten down that part in the show where he confronted Beverly with that, and because it was a big moment. It was a big character defining moment for Picard. Okay, so let's talk about the sets. Okay, I got a lot to say about the production value of what went on here with this show. I know Jonathan Frakes didn't direct it, okay, but he might have gave some pointers here and there to Terry Matalas as they went, because he, hey, look, he's got experience directing Star Trek shows, okay? Why wouldn't he ask the Commander Riker himself, any ideas you got here to make this scene better, okay? So I'm sure that he consulted with Terry Matalas off and on as they did this. Why, if Terry really liked TNG as much as he said he did, okay, and knowing the fans that I, through their comments, the one thing that keeps standing out in all the comments whenever we talk about new Star Trek these days, from Discovery to now, is the darkness that envelops these sets. Okay, very hard to read these sets the way they're lit. Okay, very hard to read those. And what I mean by that is when you think about TOS, the bridge of the original Enterprise, and you think about the bridge of TNG, the Enterprise D, and even the Enterprise E. Okay, we can pretty much create a blueprint of that bridge in our mind because we can see it all. We see the walls, we see the floor, we see where the control panels are. Okay, we can picture it in our mind, and we could probably draw it on paper. If you have any artistic skill, you could probably kind of lay it out on a piece of paper how that bridge is shaped and where everything is. I can't do that with Discovery. I can't do that with the Titan. I couldn't do that with the Stargazer 2, okay, because all those bridges were in complete darkness. Okay, all you saw was like blinky lights and graphic displays everywhere, but I couldn't tell you if we're looking at this in a sideway view or we're looking at that from front to back. I couldn't tell you if we're looking at it in a diagonal fashion because everything is everywhere. Okay, and my thing that I always stuck to when we watched like TNG is that as we move forward technologically, we're not going to need as much junk around to control things. We'll probably need fewer and fewer control panels at our fingertips because everything is going to be done automatically or without our control. And even Geordi had said that 90% of what goes on this ship, the Enterprise D, is done without our control because the ship basically does its own thing. It knows when to do something. So having a crew of so many people would be redundant. That's why there was only 1,018 people on a ship that could hold 2,000 or 3,000 people. They didn't need to have a full crew on the Enterprise D to run it. Okay, in fact, we saw Jean-Luc Picard himself fly the Enterprise D on his own back to the starbase after the Binars had taken it. So we know that the Enterprise D, okay, was very advanced from Kirk's ship, okay? And so the fact that we see these modern day starship bridges that are filled with control panels and lots of people on the bridge seems like a step back from what we considered to be, more advanced, okay, in the set development of the bridge, okay. When the Enterprise D bridge was shown in this season, they didn't darken it. They lit it up just the way it always was lit in the TV show, which was such a breath of fresh air for the eyes. To be honest, I was like grateful that they didn't bother trying to make that bridge look dark. Okay, they did a little bit in Generations, but the bridge was also a little different too. They had panels, additional panels on the sides of the bridge, which I'm glad they didn't bring back in this. What they did is they restored the bridge from the way it was in season, season 4 of TNG, and so it looks, just like it did on the TV show and not on Generations. So they, when they put the light in there, okay, and the crew was out there standing on their old bridge, you got a chance to finally see what these uniforms look like that they were wearing, and I'll tell you right now, they look like shit. They all look like they were hobos, that just strolled in their civilian clothes on the ship, and everybody's wearing black. And I'm thinking, boy, does that look depressing or what? I mean, now I can see why they had the colors that they used, on the set originally, with the reds and the teals and yellows and stuff. That that was good that they had done that. It matched, it went with the set because it brought some color, something visual into it. But I guess you can get away with wearing dark all the time if you're in the dark, so it doesn't matter. I could not see these uniforms they were wearing for the most part in this final season. And what I could see of it, I wasn't impressed. They looked sort of like biker outfits, and I didn't like them. Okay, and I don't want anything to do with those uniforms. I'm not going to buy any outfits that look like that or what. Okay, that was really the worst. It's even worse than the ones that I saw, you know, in Star Trek 2. Okay, I didn't really care for those uniforms that much either, because they all looked like dress uniforms. They didn't look like duty uniforms, and they just seemed like, you know, it's overdressed people. That, you know, the way these people wear these things, and you know, and you know, they just, I don't know, it just seemed too involved of an outfit. Okay, when we go from Star Trek the motion picture to Star Trek 2, it's like a whole different ball game. You know, I didn't like it. This is the same thing. This was the same kind of feeling about those outfits. I just did not like them, and I still don't. Okay, but hence, that's probably why they kept the bridge dark. You know, it was that they didn't want us to really see these contraptions they were actually wearing. So much gets revealed when you put light on the set, and that makes me wonder how much reason. I mean, is it they don't want us to see the whole set because maybe, you know, there's something not right with it, that they put it in darkness? And, you know, why did they do that? What makes them think the Star Trek fans like it? Because I haven't seen anybody online in the comments say anything positive about keeping these sets dark, or I mean, come on. And even in this series, they're on the holodeck on the Titan, and they're inside of a bar, and the bar itself is dimly lit. It's like, don't these people believe in light? Remember they were saying on Discovery that people in the mirror universe don't like bright light, so that's why everything is so dark. Well, are we still in the mirror universe? You know, is this really the universe that we belong in, or did we somehow skip over into that by accident? You know, so I feel like there was some discontinuity here, big time. And I don't like the style. I do not like that, and it seems like every director that gets their hands on Star Trek does the same fucking thing. And maybe it's because they're getting orders from somebody higher up in the chain that, you know, if you're going to direct this is what you got to do. You know, Gene Roddenberry never would have, I don't think would ever have accepted that. Okay, those bridges looking that way. They all look like they're ready for a combat at a moment's notice. And that's not what these ships are really designed for. It's not combat, it's exploration. Okay? And the reason why the bridge on the Enterprise D looked the way it did is it was supposed to tell you through visual means that they have evolved technologically in the 75 years since Captain Kirk. Okay? This is how they did it. You know, they had the swoopiness of that tactical station, and how the walls are rounded, and there's a, you know, frame, and you could see the ceiling. You really couldn't see a ceiling, you know, in TOS with the bridge, but you could hear, and you get the feeling that everything is remote control, essentially. You know, the panels aren't wired to the floor. They're actually movable around on the bridge. It was, as we saw in Generations, when they crashed on Viridian, the panels went flying into this. They weren't connected to the floor in any way. They're just giant remote controls, like taking this remote control here, making it into a panel, and essentially you're operating everything on that, but it, you know, it runs on its own power source or some damn thing. You know, it doesn't need to be connected to any control wires. Okay, so it's a concept that seems really more advanced than what we've been seeing on Star Trek. Okay, and it looks more advanced than what they've been making for sets. You know, it seemed like when they started with Discovery and doing it that way, they stuck with it. You know, and now they're trapped in a damn conundrum, as it were, because for some reason they thought that worked on Discovery, but it didn't. I mean, this Discovery is not really liked by many Star Trek fans, okay? And so they should have dropped that idea when they started doing Star Trek Picard. You know, they really should have, because I think if the less they make it look like Discovery, the better it's going to be for the fans, okay? And that's what they should have done when they brought in other sets for, like, the Stargazer and the Titan, you know. I think that's what they should have done. But, you know, since this whole season was filmed basically on sets and there was no outdoor live action locations, they saved a lot of money that way, I think. And so they, you know, everything relied on sets, which meant we weren't going to get very good lighting for most of the thing until at the very end, when we finally get ourselves on the D and now we can start seeing things better. Okay. Now, along with the set issues I had, another one of the issues I had was the Stargazer. I mean, not the Stargazer, but the Titan itself. Okay. The minute they introduced the Titan, I was like, what? How does this resemble Riker's old Titan that he had in any fashion? It doesn't. Okay. And I brought this up with somebody else on another Star Trek show, and they said that, well, there was a starship named Titan in the Constitution lineage. That's like, okay, but was it ever seen on TV or was it seen in the movies? Because if it wasn't, it's not canon. Okay, we don't know whether there was a Titan that looked like the Enterprise. Okay, we don't know that, but we do know what the Titan, Riker's Titan, looked like. They introduced it in the cartoons, and they showed it on the covers of books of the Titan series. So we know what the ship looks like. So I guess that's pretty much what Paramount was sticking with. But when you saw the next step of Titan in this ship, and it felt like, well, it doesn't look like it. It looks more like the Enterprise, the movie Enterprise, than it does anything else. And of course, we know why at the end that they made it look like that. Okay. But the fact is that really didn't have anything to look to, Titan, okay? I'm sorry, it just didn't. And so, it just seemed ridiculous. And aside from that, I didn't even like the design of this new Constitution class, to be honest with you. I didn't like it. To me, it looked kitbashed as all merry hell. Okay, it just... It's got way too many impulse engines on a ship that size, okay? It's just, the warp nacelles look weird, okay? They don't seem to have a nice flow to the design of the nacelles, okay? The secondary hull is a confusion that I'm not sure what it's trying to look like. It seemed like it's sort of a spin-off of the Excelsior secondary hull and the Enterprise D somehow. I don't know. It doesn't look right. It doesn't flow with the rest of, so the ship, like I said, it looks like it was just, let's take a part of this ship and part of that ship, and let's take this one and let's put it all together and see what we can make. It felt like that. It didn't seem like they sat down with a blank piece of paper and let's draw out a ship. Okay? It just felt like, remember what they did to the Enterprise D in All Good Things when we saw it? They just added a nacelle here and they put a big gun under this. It felt like that. Like they just slapped shit on the parts on this thing and put it together and say this is the, that's what it felt like. Okay? When they don't have to do it that way. If you want to make something more powerful, it's modified inside the ship, not outside the ship, okay? They do the work inside to make something do more than it did, okay? So they didn't have to make a new Constitution class look like it's been glued, all these parts were glued onto it, okay? Instead, they should have just drew out, a new design that it looks like everything is there that needs to be there, okay? Like warp nacelles that are just look like warp nacelles. Like they did with the Enterprise D, the nacelles look like they weren't things that were just slapped on there. It actually kind of goes with the whole design flow of the ship, right? Okay, so the Titan itself, unfortunately, it doesn't have many good angles when you're looking at it, okay? I don't like the top view of it looking down. The saucer looks like they clipped the back off of it, and just, I'm sorry, it doesn't work for me. And the fact that they, at the end, give it the name of the Enterprise with the G, I'm always going to call the ship the Titan Prize, okay? It's not the Enterprise, it's the Titan Prize, okay? And it's an insult that they took and put the registration -G on the hull of this thing, because why did they rename it in the first place? Okay, the ship was not destroyed, so there was no need to rename it anything else. And if the F was being decommissioned, as apparently what was going on, the next ship in the line was probably already being developed or built even, okay? They probably already had a design for an Enterprise G. And it wasn't the Titan, okay? It was probably something more advanced than that, okay? Because the Titan doesn't look like it's very advanced. It looks like a step back from even the F. I mean, the F was, you know, obviously more advanced looking than the Titan. And so to rename that the Enterprise and give it the G was like, you know, why did you do that? Okay, they couldn't just introduce a brand new ship and give that to 7 of 9. You know, come on. So I felt like that was kind of a real, you know, an insult. It was like a left-handed compliment to the fans that watched this thing and they saw that. And I don't see that many people really like that part of the Titan being renamed the Enterprise. So to me, it's not the Enterprise, it's the Titan Prize. Okay, that's the way I'm going to call it from now on. Okay, we didn't get an Enterprise G, we got a imitator. Okay, until the next Enterprise is brought in there. Okay, I'm sorry. The idea of it still irritates me to this point that they went and did that. Okay, so it just I don't know what more to say about it, except that was really a low point for me of that episode, of that part of the season. Was after everything is said and done, they just roll out a ship that was already used all this time, and they just erase the name and put another one on it. You know, I know that's what they sort of did with the Enterprise A, because the ship was named the Atlantis or something, and they renamed it the Enterprise A. But at the same time, I thought that ship was, you know, refurbished and modified anew before they relaunched it. So I don't know, but like I said, this just didn't seem right, because somebody had already mentioned it in a comment that the Enterprise was always the flagship in the fleet. Okay, it was the pride of Starfleet, which meant that ship always had the best technology. Okay, it had the best crew. It represented the best of Starfleet. Okay, that they had, which is, remember how they sent the Enterprise to meet the Romulans at the neutral zone, the episode The Neutral Zone? They did that because the Enterprise represented everything, the best that the Starfleet had. They wanted to confront the Romulans with the best kind of ship they had. They didn't want to leave anything open that you were vulnerable. We're still, you know, and so, you know, like I said, Enterprise represented the best. And here, it's not represented the best. In fact, it's, you know, second or third rate starship, you know, basically. But, you know, that's what they ended up doing there. Okay, so I'm kind of upset that's, you know, what was done in that story. The space dock. A lot of changes with the space dock. It's the space dock plus. Okay. They had extra arms to other parts around the space dock, so it's bigger. Okay, and it's because it's not the same space dock we saw in like Star Trek 3 or anything like that, because apparently that space dock was moved to the Fleet Museum, and that's where they're storing all the museum ships, as in the old space dock that Earth had. I mean, how they got it there, I don't know. Don't ask me. The space dock doesn't have warp drive, as far as I know. But instead, they built a new space dock some point even before TNG began, and we never really saw it until this season of Picard. We never really saw the space dock, and it's huge. It's big, you know. And in the story, you know, when the fleet is assimilated by the Borg and they're shooting at the space dock to destroy it, we see the space dock, you know, exploding from the inside out. Okay, and you see it just blowing to pieces. Okay, they penetrate its shields, which, you know, taking down a space dock is not an easy task. And we saw how easy it is to take down Deep Space Nine, and how many ships they destroyed before they even managed to get through a shield. Okay, so, you know, the Federation, the Starfleet has pretty good shielding for space docks. So even with all the ships shooting at it the way they were, they had, you know, it took a while for them to penetrate and finally destroy that thing, which is why you need a whole fleet in order to bring down a space station. Deep Space Nine, by the way, was way smaller than the space dock station. Okay, if you go online, you'll see a size comparison chart of, you know, Earth space dock and Deep Space Nine, and Deep Space Nine is really small. Okay, it's really not that big. But still, they managed to give it enough firepower and shielding to protect its ass, you know, against the whole fleet, which they did pretty well. So imagine that plus that big space station, all that kind of, I mean, it would have been, you know, a wipeout. But that's why they needed all those ships there at that time. And it was a dumb idea to have all the entire fleet there to celebrate Founders Day and bring all the ships in the Federation or in Starfleet to Earth. You know, and then find out that, oh, by the way, all the ships are interconnected because we have a new technology, so that if one of the ships is damaged in some way, or made, you know, unfunctional because the crew was dead, we can control the ship still by the rest of the fleet. And I'm thinking, oh, that's such a nice new technology for the Borg to infiltrate, because now it makes it that much easier for them to control the fleet. It was such a stupid idea that they put in there. It wasn't enough that they controlled the crews that made them into Borg. No, we have to also add the fact that we have a technology that also intertwines the entire fleet together to operate as one massive force. Bad idea for a you know, concept. You know, they should have learned that lesson when they dealt with the Borg for all those years. Okay, and then they should never do that. Which is why they pulled the Enterprise D out of mothballs, or out of construction rather, to stand up against the Borg, because they called it an analog ship where it's not attached to the fleet in any shape, way, or form. Okay, it's just old technology, and they said that it was the only operational ship in the that doesn't have that technology, because the D, you know, is just this old ship, and it's still being fixed up, you know, by Geordi, so they never bothered to put that technology in there. They don't have any intention of using it. But that was the ship that they had to take out of the Fleet Museum in order to deal with the Borg. Okay, because it was not vulnerable to the Borg technology to be infiltrated. Okay, so that's how they made a choice to bring it out. But yeah, they're having that, you know, and then of course they destroyed the station. Okay, the station finally gets destroyed. I mean, it's at the last minute. You know, now they're heading towards Earth. Well, after they conclude the whole story, and of course the Enterprise destroys the Borg cube just in the nick of time, and everything is brought back to normal. The people who were assimilated are no longer assimilated anymore. They modify the transporters to get rid of the devices or whatever they had in them to assimilate them again. Everything's all done. Then they say a year later, and we start with the opening shot of the space dock, all repaired and everything. I'm thinking, oh, in a year's time, okay, in a year's time, they managed to bring back another space dock, or build a brand new space dock, the size of which was way bigger than the older one, and they built it in a year? Holy shit. Talk about construction. You can't tell me that they don't run these things off an assembly line, okay? You can't tell me that they don't have some technology that operates like a replicator to spit these things out in a great speed, okay? They have to. That's the only way. You cannot build something that size in a year's time. No fucking way. Even if you utilize all the engineers that you got and from all the different worlds, it would still take time, because you still have to build from the inside out. Think about all the detail that's in the idea of building a space. It's not just an empty shell, people. It's got to have quarters. It's got to have rooms. It's got to have controls, circuit boards, power source. I mean, it takes time. It takes time. If you're going to build it the way we build things today, it's going to take time. Okay, so we're gonna have to establish at some point here in Star Trek that the way we build things in the 25th century doesn't look anything like the way we build things today, or the way they build things in the 23rd century, or the way they build things in the 24th. That they have some new way now of building things quickly. okay? And if, you know, we can't just accept, you know, 1 year later and they have the entire, a brand new space station that looks exactly like the other one, okay? No, the other one was destroyed. They didn't put it back together with glue, okay? It's gone. So they had to cart in or make another one right there, you know? So I just thought that was stupid. You know, they should have just said, well, you know, but then if they'd have added more years, it would have been like, why did they wait so long to have this final get-together with the crew? You know, it's just... they could have, at the end, they could have had brought Laris back in, and Picard and Laris, and have some kind of goodbye thing, you know, or something like that. You know, and they wouldn't have to had to show the space station at all. They could have just left that open to interpretation to the fans, saying that they're building a new one, and when that's done, we don't know. Okay, they didn't have to show that as an opening shot. But I just thought that was dumb. So yeah, those were the things. And like I said, it was nice seeing the Enterprise D. Okay, as I understand it, the star drive section that they got for the D used to belong to a ship called the Syracuse. Okay, the Syracuse was damaged, not destroyed, but damaged. And for, you know, I guess the star drive section was left behind somehow, or what, because one of the warp nacelles was gone, got blown off or something. So they got it from the debris wherever it was sitting, I guess, and they hauled it into the Fleet Museum so Geordi could basically kind of rebuild that star drive section, which probably wasn't too hard to do because most of it was intact. All he had to do was find an extra nacelle somewhere to put on it, which he did. So you got, and somebody had said when you were watching it, because they got a really good system of pause and you could see a clear picture, that they left the name Syracuse on the hull of the star drive section, okay, which was supposed to show that Geordi really hasn't finished working on it yet, and that the saucer section itself still has the burn marks from when they went into the Viridian 3 atmosphere on the hull of the saucer section, which means he still hasn't, you know, really fixed up the hull yet either on that. He's been working on the inside, which may stand to reason. I mean, if you can't, you got to make the ship airtight, okay, again, so that way you can work on it more from, you know, on the outside, okay. Then that would really be like the icing on the cake, is to fix all the panels, which is probably easier done than, you know, working on the inside. The outside can wait. So he was working on it from the inside out, and he hadn't completely finished the outside work yet. And as we know, bridge modules are interchangeable on the Galaxy class, so he probably didn't have to really rebuild a bridge. He probably just got an older model bridge to put in the spot where the other one was. They just detached the old one and put in the new one. Or maybe he did just take the bridge that was there when the saucer crashed and just, you know, tore it apart and made it look like the way it was before they modified it for generations. You know, I don't know. But he didn't really have to do that. All he had to do was put another Galaxy class bridge on it, because that's modular. Those things pop off and come on. You know, that's the way they work. It makes it quicker to modify a ship that way when everything is modular. And of course, you could see that on the star drive section, one of the nacelles had missing panels on it, so that meant there were still things Geordi was working on there. So the ship wasn't really complete. It was all operational, and it was armed, and it had weapons and stuff in there. I don't know why they would allow a museum piece to be armed to the teeth like it was, but that's what it was. They got torpedoes to fit the launchers, and they got the phasers working, and everything's working, and the shields were working. Everything's working, ready to go. And the funny thing is, as Worf says, well, I prefer the E over the D because the E had way more weapons and stuff, and the shields were stronger, and you know, they make a note that the shields on the D were old, and they didn't know if they was going to hold up to the Borg, but they seemed to hold up pretty nice in the fight. You know, the shields held right up till when they got out of that Borg cube, they didn't even get a scratch on the hull. So yeah, it's like so much for the worry over that. And so, you know, it was good to see them use the D, and of course, the whole scene of the Enterprise D flying inside the cube and getting to the core to fire some torpedoes at it and blowing it up to cause a chain reaction was also reminiscent of Return of the Jedi, where the Falcon flies down into the Death Star 2 to get to its core and shoot down a regulator that's attached to a power core to destabilize the whole thing and cause an explosion, and fly its way back out. And that's basically how they did that with the cube. The cube, you know, is and everybody was saying, oh, the ship moves too fast, you know, it's big. Well, the reason why it looked like the Enterprise D was moving like a bat out of hell in there is because everything that was in the cube is close quartered. Okay, now when you're in outer space and you're using just impulse power, it looks like you're crawling through space. Okay, it does. But you put some stuff, you know, close to the ship as it's moving, and it's going to look like it's going like bat out of hell. Okay, and they are. They're all, okay. It just doesn't look that way because you're in space, and the objects that are out there so far away, they're not going to look like they're moving. That's why if you're standing inside the ship and looking out the window, it doesn't look like you're going anywhere. You know, it looks like you're standing still until you hit warp drive, and then the stars are streaking by. Okay, but under impulse speed, it looks like you're not moving at all. Okay, when you're really going fast. So being inside the Borg cube made the Enterprise D like it was really flying like crazy, like the Falcon. Okay, and of course Data was piloting the D because apparently only an android's reactions, because he's millions of calculations a second, only he could really fly the ship like that through the cube, because he can analyze basically as they go, and he knows right to the split second when to make changes in the speed and stuff like that, and the Enterprise responds remarkably. A testament to Geordi's ability to rebuild the ship, that everything is working as tip-top as he could possibly get it to work, and it works beautiful. Okay. And while they're flying through it, Beverly Crusher is using the tactical station and just delivering all hell to the Borg as they pass through the thing, and everybody's looking at her like, where did you learn to do all that? And she's like, well, after all these years, you pick up a few things on the way, and so it was really fun to watch that going on in there. I mean, yeah, so it looked like it was Return of the Jedi, but it was still a fun scene to see the crew doing something, to go save Picard, Jack, Riker, and Worf from the cube. And they had to hurry up and get them and get out of there in time before the damn thing exploded with them in it. And I liked how when they finally got out of there, you could see the D emerging from flames, and you could see a trail of flames behind it with their shields still working. But the fire basically encompassed around the shields, and they finally get out of there when the thing blows up, and it was like, that's good, that's just funny, the way they did that. And I don't know the science behind the planet Jupiter, and they hid the cube in Jupiter. Now, someone's going to have to explain to me about gravity inside of Jupiter. I always thought that the deeper you go into Jupiter, the greater the gravity forces are to crush you, okay? I always thought that was what Jupiter was basically like, was just, that's why it stays around, okay? Is because there's gravity inside that thing that is so strong it's holding its shape. Well, if the cube was inside there, and it didn't look like it was deep inside Jupiter, but it was in Jupiter, I don't see how it was standing up to the gravity of the planet, especially if it was only working at 38% capability. The cube was not fully functional. It was damaged from what happened with Janeway, what she did to the cube. So I don't see how that really could do that. I don't know. They should have explained it. I mean, of all places to hide the cube, they picked the one planet in our solar system that probably could have crushed it, in order to, because of the gravity. But that's detail, I guess, that wasn't really thought of.